Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam shehakol nihiyeh b'dvaroi. Amen. Okay, good morning, everybody. Good Erev Shabbos. Thank you so much for joining. As we continue, Sefer Likutei Moharan B'siyata D'Shmaya Torah Lamed Ches. Today's shiur is sponsored by a new listener in honor of his wife's birthday. Just trying to get her on board to support his learning, Likutei Moharan. That's very sweet and kind. And by R Yaakov Klein, nishmas, his parents, Revka Bryndel, Bas Simcha and Ya'akov ben Yeshayihu, also dedicated as a zechus for refuah sheleimah for Chaim Yehoshua ben Chaya Miriam, as well as dedicated nishmas, Chaim Avrohom ben Yehudah Leib, and neshama should have an aliyah, and the zechus of our learning together this morning. The siyata d'shmaya, we jump back into Ois Vav, and we were mitzamtzim at the end of last week, at the end of yesterday's shiur, and we sort of ended right in the middle. So let's jump back into where we were up to. We were speaking about how this process of Tefillin and Busha and Yira and authenticity and Tefillin shel Yad and Tefillin shel Rosh and coming back into context with our higher self that elevates and rectifies dibur of achar hadvarim, dibur of kates hayamim. How Moshe Rabbeinu merited that after Klal Yisrael lost that energy post the Chetei Egel. And they lost it, and Moshe Rabbeinu had it. And then we spoke about how Moshe Rabbeinu had Karan Arpanav, which is connected to the idea of Keren Achas Hoyle B'Mitzchai, with regard to the carbon that was brought by Adam Harishon. And Memela Vayiru Migasha Selav is that they had Yira Shamayim from encountering the Tzaddik Moshe Rabbeinu. Then we started speaking about Adam and Chava. Adam Gesundheit. Adam lost his energy of Tefillin because when he was paigim in the bechina of Tefillin, which we said is connected to the Eitz HaChaim, and instead he went into the consciousness of Eitz HaDas Tov V'Ra, which is a very black and white way of looking at things, instead of penetrating down into the depth and to be able to find Hashem in the process. So Memela, he was banished from Gan Eden, Gan Eden, which is the bechina of Gehenim, right? Meaning he's because not in Gan Eden, so he's in the other place, and that's the aspect of what Chazal tells him in Pirkei Avos, as panim leGehenim, because he had lost his busha. It was the opposite of busha. Once he does tshuva, HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes for Adam and Chava the bechina of kasnas ar, garments of leather, which the Zohar says is a reference to Tefillin. Chava and Adam get kasnas ar vayal bishein, because Chava's nukva gets Tefillin shel Yad, Adam is there, Ampin gets Tefillin shel Rosh. And that's why when Adam Rishon brings his carbon, Keren Achas Haisalai B'Mitzchai, it has one Keren in the middle of its head, which is the aspect of Tefillin, right? Which is the concept of a horn that emerges from the forehead, which is a tikkun for the Metzach Isha Zoynalach Me'ant Hikalem, which is the opposite of Busha, because now he's in a state of Busha, he's in a state of Tshuva, coming back into contact with his higher self, coming back into contact with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and overcoming the impulse toward despair and hopelessness. That's where we were up to yesterday. Okay, now let's continue with the words V'Kayin. I'm actually going to need that chumash if you don't mind passing it. Thank you. So V'Kayin, Shahaya Mizuamas Hanachash, Kayin, about whom the Zohar Kadosh tells us it's called Kina de Misavusa. Kayin comes from a place of the Nachash, right? He was the result of Ba Nachash al Chava V'Hita Bazuama. Kayin was rooted. It's like a hard thing to understand. Kayin was rooted in the Nachash, Mamish. So Ksiv Bey, HaKadosh Baruch Hu says to Kayin, Lama Naflu Fanecha. Why are you discouraged? Okay, if you don't mind, let's just read the episode of Kayin just to help refresh us, because it's going to become important for the psukim. For the context of what we're learning. Okay, I'll just read quickly. Adam and Chava have Kayin. V'tomer kanisi ish as Hashem. She says, I've acquired an ish, a man from Hashem. V'toisuf l'ledes as Echav as Hevel, and then Hevel is born by Yehevel royetzayin v'kayin oived Adama. And Hevel is born with an extra twin, right? The Medrash tells us, Bereshis Rabbah, as we're going to see, right? They both were born, them and their wives, right? Essentially, because there was no one else. Right? They had to marry their sisters, right? And that's the bechin of Adam Chesed Yibane, right? Because Chesed hu, if a person marries his sister, and that's what Chazal darshan, because that's how it was a Chosi Kala in the beginning of creation, which is an odd thing to think about, but that's the way that it was. Hevel was born with 2 twins, and Kayin was jealous, as we're going to see in a minute, and wanted to take away one of Hevel's wives that Kayin felt belonged to him, because he was the firstborn. We're going to see in a minute. Kayin Eved Adama. Hevel is a shepherd. Kayin is a farmer. Vayhi miketz yamim. Miketz yamim. Vayavi Kayin mi pri Adama minchal Hashem. Kayin brings pri Adama. He brings vegetation to Hashem. Hevel hevi gam hu mi b'charis tzoynoi u'michal ve'em. And Hevel brings from his stock, which is as a shepherd, he brings animals. Hashem turns toward Hevel and his carbon al Kayin al Menchasei Loisha. And Kayin's very discouraged, right? Because Hashem turned toward the carbon of Hevel and he disregarded the carbon of Kayin. Vayiplu panav, and he becomes discouraged. Vayomer Hashem al Kayin. So Hashem says to Kayin, Lama charlach, why are you angry? V'lama naflu fanecha, why are you discouraged? Halayim teitu says, if you'll improve and you will up the level of what you're willing to offer me from the standpoint of your carbon, right, which is representative of a carbon, is what parts of you do you want to bring close to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, then it's good. But that's the lashon that we were learning, right, about this klip of Achar Advarim is lepesach chatas roivit. At every opening stands the Satan. You're going to be very seduced. You're going to be very drawn toward him. But you can overcome him. Okay, so then and that it's interesting. There's no response. Kayin doesn't answer. Vayomer Kayin al Hevel echav. Right, he's in the middle of speaking to Hashem. Next thing he knows, Vayomer Kayin al Hevel echav vayibi yosem asada. They had a conversation in the field. Vayakam Kayin al Hevel achiv vayargei. And Kayin overcomes Hevel's defense, and he kills him. Then the whole thing unfolds. Vayomer Hashem al Kayin ei Hevel achicha. Where's your brother? Vayomer lo yadati. Hashemer achi anochi. Am I my brother's keeper? Vayomer me'asisa. What did you do? Called me achicha tze'akam alayim and adama. Very powerful words. Very, very powerful words. Your brother's blood is calling out to me. And then Kayin in this state is cursed. You're going to have to wander. I can't bear it. Is it too much? You've banished me away from everybody. And I'm just gonna, that's it. I'm finished. Whoever finds me will kill me. I don't have a home. I don't have a root. I don't have a foundation. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, whoever kills Kayin, there's a curse against him. Kayin is protected, and Hashem puts a sign on Kayin's forehead. And then Kayin goes out, and we don't find that he was Navanad. Vayeshev, right? He lived in Be'eretz Noid, in a land called Noid, which was Kidmas Eden to the east of Eden. Okay, there should be so much of what we have learned in Lamed Ches that you should already hear echoing. I sort of stressed parts of it in this episode, right? The whole Lamed Ches is here. Okay, now the Rebbe is going to unfold a little bit of this and even some deeper ramazim, but let's talk about it for a minute. The Kayin, Shahaya Mizuamas HaNachash, Kayin, who was smitten, Me'ikara, meaning the Mekatrig and the Manasseh. Kayin is born already with this inclination toward the serpent. What was the serpent? The Indian of hopelessness, the Indian of Amalek, the sixth parsha, right? The Indian of Asher Korcha Baderech. Shua Mizua Masanachash Ksiv Bei Lama Naflu Fanecha. In other words, Kayin has a predisposition to Naflu Panecha after he goes ahead and falls short of his standard. He gives up Legamri. And Hashem is a bit confused. Like, I don't get it. Lama naflu panecha. Why are you so upset? Halayim teitiv seis. Like, okay, yeah, you know what I'm saying? Like, you're not on the level, but big deal. Not big deal, like, disregard it. In other words, do the work and you'll improve. It's such like a healthy thing. Like, Hashem can't understand. Lama naflu panecha. Like, why do you, where comes in this depressive inclination, this sadness, this discouragement? You fell, get back up and improve. You know, Hashem has a hard time understanding this whole culture, this whole disposition. Right? Halayim teitu says, Lama naflu panecha, like we just read. But says the Rebbe, you know what naflu panecha means? Panecha is going to be a reference to Tefillin. Shu b'chinas ara Tefillin, shu keren ara panim, which we already connected to the keren, that the kikaran ar panav, that by Moshe Rabbeinu it means his face was illuminated, there was rays coming out of his face, rays of light. And says HaKadosh Baruch Hu to Kayin Gewalt, you lost your light of Tefillin. Lama naflu fanecha. Why has the light of your face become dimmed? And the answer is because he's no longer in a state of busha. He's in despair, which is probably what caused him to bring plants and not animals. Why? What's the inyan of bringing a carbon from animals? It means that you're able to name and shame it. You're able to point a finger at it and say, Gewalt. I have an ego. I have that sense of bahamias. Behema Tameya. Hevel is willing to go. We usually think about it the other way, right? We usually think Hevel brought the better carbon. Right? Hevel brought an animal. And Kayin brought some plants. Right? That's usually the way that we think about it. Our son Shmuel Shmulka, years ago already, we were learning the parsha, wanted to know Adarabba. He said Adarabba. It was a pretty strong question again, but maybe this answers it. He says Hashem loves humble things. We see that Hashem dwelled on Har Sinai. It's the humbler, so Hashem should love the humbler carbon, not the more fancy carbon. Not a bad question for a 4-year-old. Then, right? It's a pretty decent question, right, Hashem? So
also we see it's a beautiful inyan that we elevate. We learned this Likutei Moharan to elevate the lowest level up to eventually becomes a medaber. Like there's this inyan of, which is, there's nothing wrong with the korban that doesn't speak or doesn't breathe. You're always elevating it. It's still mamash elechachil korban.
Right. So in the context. So in the context of what we're learning now, right, it isn't just about the quality of how expensive it is. You have to understand what a carbon is in the first place. Carbon is representing ourselves. It means that I recognize my own bahamias. I tried to illustrate going to the Beis HaMikdash with your carbon, right, with your behema. And it's the bechina v'esa behema hatmeya. And Hevel is willing to do the work. Right? Hevel is just open. Hevel says, I see, I have a behema, and I'm going to bring it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I'm going to shecht it, Torah Lamed Zayin. I'm going to elevate the sparks of Adam that it contains, and it's going to be great.
I was thought one was a farmer, one was a shepherd, so they each brought their...
Apipshat, of course. Apipshat, that's how you read it, right? But obviously, there's so many deeper layers. So on a deeper, on a simple level, Hevel was a shepherd. He brought a sheep. Kayin is a farmer. He brought plants. Okay, but I'll be pnimius, which is how we're learning it now. It's much deeper. The way the Rebbe is setting it up, Hevel is doing the work. He brings an animal. Kayin is a bechina of v'esabehema asher einanu tahira, right? Einanu tahira is he brings a plant. He brings, which is a level of consciousness higher. He's not willing to go down to the place of the Bahamias, because he's already in the bechina of it was you saw he miket miket sayamim, right? It was he's already rooted in the place of kina de misavusa, the place of the serpent's bite. Mele, he's in a state of naflu panecha. Shebechinas ara Tefillin shu keirim ara panim. Kayin hevi psoile sharay chayiv kol echad. Beyond that, Kayin brought from the psoiles means he was in a state of seeing the negative in everything and in everyone, and he couldn't even find the beauty in being able to carry up the lowliness into the presence of Hashem. The Isa, and it's brought in the Medrash Tanchuma vayasim lekayin ois. Hashem made for Kayin a mark, and Rashi over there brings a mark on his forehead, but the Medrash Tanchuma says shezarach loikeren. Kayin also got a ray of light out of his forehead. Just like it says by Moshe Rabbeinu. Hainu kanal. And that was after Kayin did tshuva. Remember, Kayin said, God love him inside. He chapped. Wow, like this is very heavy. I can't carry this. That was the bechin of tshuva. Then HaKadosh Baruch Hu fixed it up and said, I'm going to protect you. Made a mark on his forehead. The mark on his forehead is the mark of Tefillin that he had lost. V'zeh bechinas b'Kayin. That's what it says. V'zeh shekasa b'Kayin. That's why it says by Kayin, v'yeshev be'eretz Noid kidmas Eden. That in the end, the tikkun was he would live in the land of Noid, kidmas Eden, east of Eden, perish, which means shaloi zachal Eden. He didn't merit Gan Eden al yidei shepagam ba'arat tefillin, because even though HaKadosh Baruch Hu was rectifying him to an extent, he was still disassociated from the light of tefillin. And says the Rebbe, an amazing remez, v'zeh kidmas. The word kidmas, kuf daled mem taf, is Rosh Tevis, is the acronym for karkafta deloi manach tefillin. A skull which is not kept tefillin, which is, according to the Gemara, like the, if not, or one of the, but the definition of an am haaretz, right? Is a karkafta deloi manach tefillin. That's what Lubavitch Rebbe was very strong. You know, if we just put tefillin on every skull, then that will prevent them from being called a karkafta deloi manach tefillin. But that's what kidmas is. Kidmas Eden means he was not able to access the level of Gan Eden, which is the R of the Eitz HaChaim, the R of Tefillin, because he was kidmas Eden. Kidmas is karkafta deloi manach Tefillin. And that's why the Chazal say in Tainis, Mi sheyesh by azus, b'yadua shenichshel be'eshes ish. A person who has azus, who doesn't have this sense of busha, then in other words, everything is possible for such a person, because they don't have that sense of tension pulling them back from the brink. And so then the ultimate in this sense is just, you may as well, so everything is hutra or tzua. And so they allow themselves, shenichshel be'eshes ish. Says the Rebbe, it's very precise. What's the arat tefillin? Is the arat busha, it's Yirah Shamayim. Contact with our higher self, right? Tefillin shel rosh, tefillin shel yad. Kayin, who lost this, Memela goes right out of the conversation with Hashem, where Hashem is pointing out that he has this strange inclination to become discouraged and depressed and in despair as a result of his not being able to contact HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the proper way, or in the way that he thinks he ought to contact him. And he goes and kills Hevel. What does he kill Hevel for? So like I mentioned when I was reading the Psukim, the Medrash says that Hevel was born with two twin girls who were going to be his wives. Kayin was only born with one. Kayin is a bechin of kina, right? He became very jealous of Hevel. And Adrabah, he felt that because he was the firstborn, so he should be the one, right, who has two wives, and Hevel has one. And is a bechin of Eishes Ish. He was going after one of Hevel's wives. That's what the Gemara says in Tainis. Misha yesh by azus, that was Kayin, because he lost his tefillin, and tefillin is the bechin of busha. Biyadua shenichshel be'eshes is ki Kayin amal tu umasay shel Hevel, because Kayin was coming after the ta'oma, the female twin of Hevel. Kamay shekasa v'hi b'yoysa masada. That was what was going on in the field over there. That was the zechus. That was the argument. So now back to what the Rebbe had said prior to bringing up Adam and Chava. He doesn't mention Chava, which is interesting, but Adam and Kayin. The Maimer Chazal, that Mishi yesh by Azus biyadua shalei amdu ragle avoysav al har Sinai, that a person who has Azus, it's telling that he doesn't come from the stock of the tradition of the Jewish nation whose feet stood at the foot of Sinai. The Yisrael sha'amdu al Har Sinai paskazu amasam, because Klal Yisrael who stood at Har Sinai, what does it mean? It means paskazu amasam, right? We learned the Gemara in Shabbos. Their zuama, right? Their filth seized. Hainu zuama sanachash, which is the filth of the serpent. But the umas ha'olam shaloi amdu lai paskazu amasam. They still haven't yet learned this lesson. They still need us to teach them this lesson. Right, which is the bechina of vayiru mimcha. Right, they're supposed to receive this sense of busha, this sense of yira, this sense of dignity, this sense of awareness of human potential and what it means chaviv adam sheniver b'tzelem. They didn't get that. So v'zeh biyadua shalei amdu raglei avoysav. Memela, a person who has azos, in as much as azos means the opposite of busha, And in as much as azus means to become convinced by the depressive nature of the nachash, which is the place where the zuama comes from. So a person stands by Har Sinai, and they've overcome the zuama. But a person who doesn't have this busha, who has this azus, what does that show? The adua shalei amdu raglei avoisav raglei daika, and it's speaking daika about the feet. Shalei amdu raglei avoisav means if you just take that part of the sentence without al Har Sinai, what's the lashon? Al Har Sinai, you just have their forefathers had no feet. Shalei amdu raglei avoisav, their forefathers didn't stand. Says the Rebbe, raglei daika yaki ein lahem raglayim, because they didn't have feet. Why didn't they have feet? Because the nachash didn't have feet. And because so it says the Rebbe, it's daika. They didn't stand at Har Sinai. What happened at Har Sinai? Paska zuamasam. Where did the zuama come from? The nachash. What did the nachash have? A tummy. What didn't he have? Feet. Says the Rebbe, anybody who has azus, in other words, the zuama was not pasak by them. They didn't get the tikkun of Har Sinai, which was to give us feet. What are feet? Feet are, right, as yikum asher b'ragleihem, it says about the wealth that Klal Yisrael brought out of Egypt. Chazal says shemamidin adam al raglav, right? Feet are, you have stability. Feet are, you're able to stand. Feet are balance, right? You can speak about that energy of walking, right? The ability to use one side and then balance it by the other side in a constant dynamic, not even a static dynamic, right? It's more of a sort of a constant a system of balancing that enables a person to propel themselves forward. Fascinating. Hashem could have installed wheels. We would go a whole lot faster, right? There could be any other numbers of technologies to propel us. Hashem chose legs. Because legs are, it's mamish precise, right? One foot and then the other foot. Netzach and hoid, netzach and hoid, netzach and hoid. It's a constant process that then enables the person not just to be, which is what the torso does, because it just exists. It is bridging, right, the right arm and the left arm, chesed and gvura, and it's static, right? And that's the trunk of a person. Okay, once you have the person, though, how are they going to propel themselves? Like we spoke last night. Right, the bechina of you have to know the map and then you have to have a vehicle. But how do you go? The legs. The legs.
The nachash before the nachash sinned, had legs.
Yes.
So that's
Hashem took his legs away.
That's somewhat interesting, because at the point of him sinning, he had legs, and his punishment was that the legs were removed. There's something to think about there in terms of mecha devorim. Because at the point of sinning, he sinned with legs.
Yes, I would say that it's reflected, we sort of hinted to this, in the fact that when Adam and Chava sinned, they're still in Gan Eden. It's as a result of the sin. You remember we said that's what caused them to hide. It isn't shot that they did the sin and then they hid. If they wouldn't have done the sin, they would have never had this consciousness in their brain about the possibility of sinning and then hiding.
Was the sin hiding rather than the initial fall?
Perhaps, right? We mentioned yesterday in Shir, or was it yesterday, 2 days ago, about the web and then getting eaten by the spider. Like, that's the ikr point. That's exactly right. That's why and the Rebbe, actually, we said that Rebbe Nachman uses the very precise terminology of saying that my teachings have taken the venom out of the snake bite, right? And it's very precise. The nachash has the bite, but the venom is the giving up. The venom is, because of that, he completely loses himself. He loses his legs, right? Meaning he doesn't know how to stand. And that's the bechin of sheker. Sheker ein la raglayim, right? It says sheker doesn't have legs. And that's what the nachash represents. A lot to think about there. Let's go weiter. Ein la raglayim, k'may shekasav al gachayin chasedech v'zeh shekasav vayasem Hashem l'kayin ois. What does this mean? Perish Rashi, hechser moira'oi aleihem. It means that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put the fear, al pi pshat, it means everyone would be afraid of Kayin. What was Kayin worried about? They're going to kill me. Hashem made a sign on Kayin's forehead, they'll be afraid of you. But how have we been learning fear of? Right, in the past few days, we learned it already twice in two contexts. Yes, Tefillin, but we learned about the fear of the nations of the world. The fear of the nations of the world, Abbas, the fear of the people toward Moshe. We learned that it's not fear of, it's fear on account of, right? Fear from. They weren't afraid of Moshe. They had Yiras Shamayim on account of Moshe's Yiras Shamayim. The Yisrael are not going to be afraid of us. They're going to have Yiras Shamayim on account of our Yiras Shamayim. Says the Rebbe the same thing by Kayin. It doesn't mean that Hashem put a sign in Kain's forehead, which is the bechina of Tefillin, Busha, and now the people were afraid of him. He says, no. V'zesher kasav zar, v'yasam Hashem l'Kayin ois perish Rashi, hichser ma'ro'ay aleim, k'moishe kasav v'ro kol ami ha'aretz. K'moishe kasav, kad tov b'tiyufta, after Kayin does tshuva, even though he was still locked out of Eden. It was all kidmas, even though he had already done tshuva. Hashem put the light on his forehead, right? And then it says he was in kidmas Eden, and kidmas is karkafta deloy manach tefillin, right? Because he still has a lot of work to do, and that goes to the point of tshuva al tshuva, so tshuva al tshuva, so, and then it's like an ever constant process, v'chatasi l'negdi samid, like David HaMelech says in Tehillim, to keep on going ahead and working through that and trying to go back to that, and what was that, and how did that happen, and how could that have happened? I can't believe that, and to keep on doing tshuva constantly for that. But ultimately, v'yasam Hashem l'kayin ois, and hechser mo'ra'oi aleihem, and as a result, that made the people have Yiras Shamayim on account of what Kayin had gone through. And again, I think it's prescient and it's true for each of us in our own lives that the ultimate goal of losing, right, which all of us do in one way or another, our sense of busha, our sense of dignity, our sense of confidence, recognition of who it is that we really are, that catalyzes, hopefully in a healthy way, contact with tzaddikim, the possibility through the energy of hope to start to begin the process of return in the bechina of tshuva, tefillin shel yad, and then tefillin shel rosh, and the whole system's activated again, is a process with tremendous utility. Forget about ourselves, but utility for others. Right? This is like the final step in the 12 steps. Like after a person goes through the whole process, you need to be of service to others, right? You need to go ahead and you need to find a way to bring this to other people and be for other people what others were for you. That's the ultimate tikkun. At the end of the process is to take that experience and to project it outward, to show other people that as a result of you having gone through your process, you having achieved access to your busha, to your yira, you're a person now who's living with an innate sense of self, an innate sense of worth, an innate recognition that you could accomplish things in this world, and that you could overcome obstacles, you can break past boundaries, you can carry yourself with that sense of confidence. When people see that, it has hashpah on them. If you don't present yourself as Dumbledore and then Muggles, right? That's like we said the other day. It has to be even. If you remind, it's not even like present yourself. It's just if you remind everyone that you're just regular, and everybody's the same, and that everybody in their own unique way could contribute in the same way that you're contributing, then it has a huge impact. Huge impact. Huge impact. And then all of a sudden you see that as a result of your own process, which comes with a lot of pain and challenge and difficulty, but all of a sudden, v'yiru mimeka. V'ro kol ha'amei ha'aretz ki shemesh v'nei kalecha, v'yiru mimeka, like it says by Moshe Rabbeinu, v'yiru migeshes elav. Hechser ma'ra'ai aleihem. Very powerful. Okay, take a look at Oz Zayin. Let's try to push forward. V'zesh sipra atana, and that's why the Gemara in B'chayris Daf Nun Zayin Amud Beis, Atana there is describing in very exaggerated language, obviously, the tremendous fruits and the tremendous grandeur of the place that he comes from. And he said, for example, Erez Nafa, after describing the fruits, he says, Erez Nafal b'Mekaimenu, there was a huge cedar tree that fell in our vicinity. Va'avra Yudvav Kranis al Chudai, and 16 wagons were able to drive on its side. Right, that's how massive the cedar was. 16 wagons, meaning like the width of 16 wagons, was able to drive on the side of this tree that had fallen down. Mapshat al Pipnimis. What's the deeper meaning? Says the Rebbe, We'll go through this part a little bit more quickly. Ki adua, because it's known shat tzaddik sha'ovid es Hashem b'dveikus gadol u'b'seichel gadol, a tzaddik who serves Hashem with tremendous dveikus and tremendous consciousness, kishenayfel le'ezem madrega pchusa, when he falls to a level that's pchusa mimena, that's below his current level, afal pisha zois hamadrega shu achshav ba gam hi madrega gadol l'erech shar tzaddikim, even though the madrega that he's currently at would be considered a very great madrega for the other tzaddikim, so instead of learning 24 hours a day, he's learning 23 hours a day, right? He's still on a tremendous madriga, because from the standpoint of his own emesa level, that's considered a nefila. Whom is bayish b'zeh madriga. He feels busha in that place, as if he would have, as if it's considered a chait. And Imamish does tshuva, and the Bechina, what the Baal Shem Tov says, that to a Yid who's Mamish davak v'sartem, the minute you turn away, that's already what? He served idol worship? No. But a person who's on the level where Mamish Kechuta Saira, HaKadosh Baruch Hu expects because of the level that the person's really at, and he turns away for a minute, he's already doing tshuva on that. And the bechinas tefillin, bechinas az tavin yiras Hashem. And that brings him to an even higher level of awareness, of consciousness, like we described. Now, when Klai Yisrael stood at Har Sinai, Paskazu Amasam, why did that happen? Where did that come from? Right? Where did it come from? That when Kisha Amdu, right, Ragli Aviseinu Har Sinai, Paska Zuamasam. What's the Zuama? Azos, the opposite of Busha. Paska Zuamasam, they received their Busha again. When did that happen? Says the Rebbe, it was Al Yidei Aluchas. It was because of the Luchas Kamuva, as is brought in the Zer, Chaim Yehoshua Nasa v'Nishma. When Klai Yisrael said Nasa v'Nishma, so the Medrash tells us that they received Ksarim, right? The Malachim came and put 2 crowns on the top of everybody's head, one for Nasa, one for Nishma. But the Zohar says something else. Zachul Chagiras Zaina Ilah. They received the elevated warrior's belt. Amazing thing. They received the belt of a warrior, I presume, with swords and weapons and things like that. Says the Rebbe, this is a reference to the Tefillin. Zaina Ilah is like a strapping of leather, right? In this context, it means a belt, but it means that they were enwrapped. They were girded. Says the Rebbe, it's a bechina of Tefillin. Moshe zachal keren arpanim. Do you know why Moshe Rabbeinu's face shone? Me ar haluchas, from the light of the luchas. Ki hema moichin va'atzman. The luchas are the moichin. When we say moichin, we mean chachma and bina, as we're going to see. When, like we said, when a person learns Torah, Pinimius HaTorah, a Torah that awakens them in the nighttime, that's able to bring them back into contact with their true self and start to look at the world clearly and look at failure clearly and look at a relationship with Hashem clearly and understand was tutzach, like what are we doing on this world? What are we trying to accomplish? Nischaddu ha-moichin, then the moichin are activated again. And then there's going to be a tremendous level of renewed recognition. If you don't mind, Jeremy, just plugging this in the back over there. Right? Of a renewed level of recognition and that's going to lead to even more busha. Now the luchais him shayrish ha-Torah. The luchais, we know, is the root of the entire Torah. V'nikrayim yud vav, and they are called yud and vav. We already learned this. Al shem aseres hadibros. Right, we learned this in was it Torah Lamed Hey? No, Torah Lamed Daled. Right, Torah Lamed Daled is vav. The Rebbe says the same thing there. 10 dibros, that's the yud, and the vav is va'arkan vav v'rachban vav, right? Because the luchas were 6 by 6. This is chachma and bina, because we learned over there in Lamed Daled that chachma is the nakuda, right? The dot, it's the yud, and bina is the line. Chachma is Eden, bina is v'nahar yoytze me'eden, right? It's the hispashtus of that light. Yud and vav. The luchas, chachma and bina, moichin. the ha'ara of self in the context of other. The only reason that in Bina we always speak about the fragmented shards of glass still held in the pane is because the light of Chachma is illuminating Bina. The lower part of Bina is the fragmentations where all the pieces of glass blow out of the pane. When we speak about Bina as the place, right, where all fragmentation is held in coherence, it's because there's a yichud Chachma and Bina, always. But it's the Chachma light within Bina that's doing the holding together. That's Moichin. I have a sense of self. I have a behemoth. I had a Yerida, but I'm able to see it in a holistic context of a singular narrative of tshuva. The tzaddik nikra eres balavana. The tzaddik is called a cedar tree. Like we're going to sing tonight. Tzaddik atam yifrach ke eres balavana niska. So now let's go back to what he was saying. B'pnimius. V'zesh siper hatana b'shivcha shel tzaddik. Sorry, the Tana was speaking about the shebach of a tzaddik shayat tzaddik b'doirei. He was describing a particular tzaddik in his generation. V'nafal b'mekaimenu. And what does it mean? The cedar fell in our vicinity. Means the tzaddik descended b'mekaimenu to our level, and it's the Tana talking, right? To our level, and that was called the nefila for the tzaddik. V'nafal b'mekaimenu, right? When the tzaddik lighted upon our own madrega, it was a nefila. Certainly, I mean, a Tana is a Tana, right? So of course, he was on such a high madrega. But when the tzaddik fell b'mekaimenu, that was called a nefila. And then, what did he say about that? The cedar tree fell, and ba'avru alav yud vav kranes al chudai. 16 wagons passed on its side. Va'avru, the word va'avru is lashon is galus. Could mean to become revealed. Kamash Kasav, va'avra Hashem lingav es Mitzrayim, makas b'charis. HaKadosh Baruch Hu passed over lingav es Mitzrayim, and that's an aspect of revelation. Hashem was revealed. The Tirgum Unkel is v'izglei, and Unkel says under the word va'avar is v'izglei Hashem. Hashem was revealed. Okay, so va'avru alav was revealed as a result of the Erez, which is the tzaddik nafal b'mekaimenu, having an experience of descent. Yudvav kranais al chudai. Says the Rebbe, look at every single aspect of this. Yudvav is the bechin of Chachma and Bina. Kranais is the bechin of Karen. Busha, Yira, as a result of the seichel that's activated. Hainu, and what's chudai is chidud haseichel, the sharpening of the intellect. Hainu, ayidei chidud sichlei v'chidush sichlei, when the tzaddik doesn't allow himself to fall below bina into the realm of 7, and then to fall into the chaos of instability, thinking that he's hopeless, thinking that there's what's going on here. Hashem is not in this place. And where I am currently, there's no way for me to reintegrate this back into a deeper narrative. This is so far an anomaly that I'm finished, and there's no hope for me. Lepesach chatas revet. There's no ability for me to return. Every time I'll try something new, the chatas will already be there. It's a bechin of Kayin, Kina de Misavusa, Mekatrig, and Emanase. Even before he starts, he's already finished. Once his mind is refreshed, that he received on account of the Torah, which is rooted in the Luchais, Yud and Vav, Chachma and Bina, Nizgale Keiroin Ar Apanim. Therefore, Kronais, Hainu Busha Bechinas Tefillin. As a result of Al Chidai, because of the activation and the sharpening of his seichel, which is Yud Vav. And then he attains Kronos, because Al Chidai, on account of the sharpening of the Yud and Vav, you could also read it Chad Vav. Meaning, what element are we really working on of the Yud and the Vav is the Vav, right? The Yud is already unified. The work is to take Bina, which has an aspect of Minad Din and Misarin, where Din, right, splinters downward on account of Bina, and to be able to lift it back up to the light of Yud, to bring the Nahar and to trace it back to its source, back to Eden. Soides Neraim. Says the Rebbe, Gam HaKadosh Baruch Hu Nikar Mekayim Shel Hashem is also called the Mekayim Shel V'zeh Perish, you can also say, Nafal B'Mekaymenu. Meaning, and I sort of spoke this out a little bit, Nafal B'Mekaymenu, Shenafal Lahasagas Alikus Lefi Hasagasenu. What does it mean that tzaddik fell in our makom? Meaning in our perception of Hashem. That was called the tzaddik nafal b'mekayim Hashem b'mekaymenu. Our perception of Hashem. That was a big nefila for the tzaddik. Hagam shegam hasagasenu gedayla. We have a great, deep perception of Hashem. Right? In relative terms to his true level, because it was mikaymenu, that was already nafal b'mikaymenu. Sheshab b'tshuva umizbayish b'hasagasenu, and therefore that catalyzed the tzaddik into a process of busha and tshuva, and that led to the tzaddik being able to be mechaded his seichel, chachma and bina, to remember that his own sense of self is supposed to be seen in the context of the other, which is the light of the chachma, which is the primordial unity from which bina emerges, and ikra bina, ikra briya is begin the ishtamoidin. There has to be a sense of self, but only for the purpose of bringing back together those two parts that were sundered. Memela chronos. And Memela, that activates the sense of busha, yira, that's then able to bring busha and yira to others. And this is pshat, because we're speaking about Parshas Bereshis the whole time. Bereshis is Yare Boishis. The Tikkun Zohar tells us the word Bereshis contains the letters of two words, Yare Boishis, Yira and Busha. Ki ayira hu abusha, because Yira and Busha, like we said, are synonymous. Tam and Rashi, Tam and Bas. And then the Zohar also tells us that we have in this word Bereshis, Rashi and Bas. Rashi means the heads of, and Bas means the daughter. So what's the heads of? So it's a reference to Rashi Beis Havoisa, our forefathers, who are really our three fathers, which is Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. They are Rashi Beis Havoisa, and that's what Rashi refers to in the word Bereshis, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov. In other words, integrative stability, like we were learning the whole time. These are the three colors of the eye, which is Chesed, Gvur, Tiferes, and then Bas Ayin, the pupil, which is the Bechina, like we learned in previous Torahs, of Malchus. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, David. The Ragli Merkava, Yud, He, Vav, and then He. Mayim, Eish, Ruach, and Afar. Right in the word Bereshis, you already have the fundamental foundations for all of reality. Rashi, Bas. It's Bereshis. Avram, Yitzchak, Yaakov, David. Yud, He, Vav, and He. Says the Rebbe, and really Ramaz Mekayim Tefillin. It's really a reference to Tefillin. Uletoy tafais bein einecha. Because the whole process of Tefillin, which again, we began with, we're speaking about Malchus, Dibur, Peh, Chava, Nukva, David, Ani Tefillah, right? You want to fix up Dibur? Bring it into the construct of the energy of the Avos HaKadosh, where Chesed, Gvura are balanced to produce Tiferes. That's Va'ilatay Tafais. You want Tefillin? Bein Einecha. And it's like a Bein Einecha, meaning the eye itself represents balance, because we just said the eye is Tlas Gavn de Eino Basai, right? So Gevalt, the Bein Einecha is like the balance of the balance. It's like balance, Sheba balance, right? It's in between the two elements of in between, right? Va'ilatay Tafais Bein Einecha. What do we say about the Tafas in Torah Lamed Gimel? Tat Pas. Duality of duality that's brought into one container. That's what Tefillin are. Balance, Sheba balance. Oiter Yisrael b'sifara. The Ataras, the Keser, the ultimate root from which all balance emerges. Tefillin. Tefillin, heilige Tefillin. We should teach this to bar mitzvah bacher, no? Imagine if every bar mitzvah bacher before he turned bar mitzvah would know this. On his level. Tefillin. Endless depth, endless depth. Endless depth. But that's Likutei Moharan for you. Like, someone so Lamed Ches is about Tefillin? Like, no. I mean, yes, but it's also about 2 million other things. You know, it's not that kind of thing. It's not like, the Rebbe doesn't have like an essay on Tefillin. What comes out from this world of Torah Lamed Ches is the most fundamental, side of what Tefillin is. Then the Rebbe says, and that's why there are 4 parshiyas in the Tefillin Shalosh. That's exactly what it is. It's Bereshis, it's Rashi Bas, it's Yari Baishes. Right? It brings all these elements together. That's what Tefillin are. Let's finish the last part, and then we'll finish up next week. V'zeh Perish. Erev Shabbos Kodesh. This is the Perish of the Pasuk in Yeshayihu, from which we learn so many of the Shavusim, so many Derabanans we learn from this Pasuk in Navi. Im tashiv mishabas raglecha. If on Shabbos you will withhold from walking, asais chafatzecha b'yom kadshi, right, and doing your chafatzim on my holy day. Right, Yehulechecha, davar davar. We learn so many of the different elements, right, of kavod Shabbos, oining Shabbos, kavod Shabbos, right, from this pasuk. Says the Rebbe al pi pnimius. Ki Shabbos b'chinas busha. Shabbos is busha because Shabbos is the letters boishes. Right? Shabbos is the bechina of busha. Shabbos is malchus, but Shabbos is malchus rectified. Shabbos is malchus that's me'ein Olam Haba. What's Olam Haba is bina. Right? Shabbos is the aspect of a reality that's the way it's supposed to be. Recognizing our true selves, recognizing the world for what it could be. It's a me'ein of Olam Haba. The world is not fixed yet. But in the sense that we recognize that the world could be fixed, it's already fixed. It's half the battle. That's what Shabbos is. It's a me'ein of Olam Haba. Not that the world is Olam Haba mamish. The world is still full of pain. The world is still full of brokenness on Shabbos like on Monday. But it means on Shabbos, hopefully, because of its activation by the light of Bina, the light of unity, we at least remember, there's a higher state. This is what the world could be. Imagine if every family, Jew and non-Jew alike, in every single city, took the time to sit with family and to shut off the tech and not to be busy with work. Like this is what we hope. La'asad lavai, right? Again, lo yekal esek kol ha'olam ela dasas Hashem b'lvad. That's what Shabbos gives us the ability to sort of re-attain and achieve contact with that higher state. We were speaking about a person's individual self, getting in touch with your tshuva, with your higher state. The whole world has a higher state. It's called Bina, right? It's called Olam Haba. It's called the world that could be. That's what it means. Not the world that it's Olam Haba. It's the next iteration of what this world will become. Shabbos is me'ein Olam Haba. So it's a place of busha, because busha means that all of a sudden there's dissonance. Dissonance is only possible if, like we said, the higher state is in the parsha b'chalal. That's what happens on Shabbos. Shabbos is me'ein Olam Haba. Shabbos is the letters busha, boishes, because all of a sudden there's busha. Wow, what if I could live like this all the time? Why don't I live like this all the time? Now again, this is assuming that Shabbos is as it's supposed to be. Right? If Shabbos is not, so then it's not likely to cause any sense of busha, right? On the contrary, it's further intensified. But if a person does Shabbos properly, and a person has the big zechus, I'm still trying to figure out how he does it, to come to shul early before mincha and to learn, and a person takes it seriously, a person mamish does Shabbos the way that it's supposed to be, with learning and with meals that are Torah-dik and Shabbos. So then, Olam Haba, Shabbos is boishes. So Shabbos is boishes. Im tashiv mi Shabbos raglecha. B'tchila tzarich l'sakana dibor anikra regel. We said regel is called dibor. Regel is called tzedek. Tzedek is dibor. The Echte Sakan HaDibor. So how am I going to do that? How am I going to get out of the Pagam HaDibor, which was the Bechina of Achar Dvar? How am I going to get out of that? The answer is Asois Chafatzecha B'Yom Kaji. Asois Chafatzecha B'Yom Kaji. Huh? Apipshat, it means withhold, right? Because the words in Tashiv is going on Asois Chavatzecha. Do not do your Chavatzecha B'Yom Kaji. But the Rebbe says no. It means do your chafatzim b'yom kaji. Well, I should work on Shabbos. What does the Rebbe mean? The curse of the Nachash brings into the world 39 curses, 39 malachas, which is the 39 malachas. And a person, the ultimate goal, in order to try to bring the world a little bit closer to the Olam Haba, that ha'ara of which is shining on Shabbos, that makes Shabbos a me'ein Olam Haba, is to bring the kedusha of Shabbos into the 6 days of the week. Remember Shabbos the whole week long. Bring Shabbos into the weekday. The more that Shabbos doesn't stay contained to Shabbos, but as a result of Shabbos, which is Boishes, I come into contact with what I could be. The world comes into contact with what it could be. There's dissonance. And I say, you know something? I don't want my Sunday stam to look like any old Sunday. On account of Shabbos, which is the Makar HaBracha, I'm going to make sure that my Sunday is Shabbos day. I'm going to do my bit to bring the world just a little bit closer so that the whole world should reflect what on Shabbos it reflects. So then I'm pushing away the zuam of the Nachash, Kates Kalbasar, Shibuchinas Ruach Sa'ara Va'ayideza Oila Dibor, and then the Dibor has an elevation. Vizet Perish, so that's Pshat. Asois Chavatzecha, meaning during the week. Kisha'ata Oisa Chavatzecha and B'me'achol, it should be B'yom Kachi. Asois Chavatzecha, during the week. B'yom Kachi, bring the energy of Shabbos into the week. As a result of Shabbos, as a result of having again been able to come into contact, at least even from a distance, to glimpse a world that could become. And you feel busha. Okay, so now do the work. Yidme ki'ilu achshav yom kachi. It will be during the week, ki'ilu, it will be Shabbos day. Hanesha tamshich mikdusha Shabbos al yemei achol. And then we will break out of the 39 malachas, of the 39 aspects of the curse of the Nachash, and instead it will become Tal Chayim. It will become the Bechin of the Eitz HaChayim. And that will bring us back into the R of Tefillin, that will bring us back toward the R of Bina, that will bring every aspect of self to reflect the loving gaze, like we learned last night, of the other, of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's presence, and therein rectifying the Bria, and fulfilling the purpose of the Bria, which was Bina, which was Bria. Ikar HaBria was begin to come to know HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the ups and the downs and the good times and the bad times. Tar Lamed Gimel B'Tivo Bein Ba'aku, right? Tamid Yimtza HaKadosh Baruch, Tamid Yimtza Hashem Yisbarach, and that's the Bechina of Tefillin. Sheniska,
Shabbos.
Shabbos, good Shabbos, good Shabbos. Yasher Koyach. Thank you so much.
אני הבן ואתה האב שלי שכל כך אוהב אותי האב שלי מלך חי וקיים על כל נשימה שאני